I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, the Senate voting to acquit former President Trump of inciting the Capitol Hill insurrection. But days later, the NAACP and Mississippi Representative Bennie Thompson, the Democratic chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, are suing Mr. Trump and his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, alleging they conspired to ignite violence. GOP Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina weighs in on President Trump's acquittal, his future, and her push for schools to return to in-person learning. The electricity grid struggles in Texas continue with record high demand amid historically cold temperatures. Fox News contributor and assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, James Freeman, and Fox News Radio's Jeff Manasso discuss the blackouts and how the issue is putting the future of energy generation in the spotlight. Plus commentary from former Utah Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Sandra Smith.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Ainsley Earhart, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. I'm Dave Anthony. It's more than a month since the riot. The Trump trial's over, and one House Republican tells us there's no sign of unity.
I've been threatened to be shot by Republicans now and Democrats, right? We're seeing this rhetoric ratchet up. It's not getting better right now, and we need to really look at ourselves and say, what are we going to do about this in the future? We've got to have some common ground.
I'm Lisa Brady. An icy blast of winter leaves millions in the cold, heating up the debate about green energy.
When there is a push to move to renewables instead of the more reliable sources such as coal, you do, unfortunately, have to sacrifice some level of reliability.
And I'm Jason Chaffetz. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Just days after former President Trump was acquitted at the Senate impeachment trial, it is not over for at least one House Democrat. Congressman Bennie Thompson and the NAACP are suing the former president and attorney Rudy Giuliani, who led many Trump election challenges, accusing them of conspiring with the far-right groups, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, in the deadly Capitol attack, in violation of the 150-year-old Ku Klux Klan Act, which attempted to stop political violence right after the Civil War. Trump spokesman Jason Miller says the former president did not incite or conspire with anyone. What does President Biden think?
He certainly supports the rights of individuals, members of Congress and otherwise, to take steps through the judicial process.
Press Secretary Jen Psaki also says the president would support a 9/11 type commission to investigate the attack. Democratic Congresswoman Catherine Clark tells Fox,
this is a chance to take it out of the realm of politics and put it into the hands of experts.
But Republicans are turning their attention more on the National Guard troops still deployed and all the fencing at the Capitol.
You see the 7-foot fencing, and it's not barbed wire. Apparently it's razor wire, and it looks like you're in a green zone of a war-torn country.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace is one of the new House Republicans from South Carolina.
And here we have a Congress that doesn't want to fund a border wall or southern border, yet they want to fund fencing and keeping people out of our Capitol. And so I think one of the frustrations we see, and this is putting it lightly, that people have with Congress and with our nation's Capitol is the hypocrisy in the way that we apply different policies or ideologies to our country. This is a free country. We shouldn't be blocking people from visiting our Capitol. It is a safe place today, and we want people to admire and respect the freedoms that we cherish.
I mean, obviously it was a little over 40 days ago when the Capitol was attacked. You don't think there's a threat any longer? You think the troops should go away?
I do believe that the troops can go away. I would like to see an investigation on or at least have some hearings or some more information on why they're going to be there for so long. There was talks of them being here through March, and now I'm reading news reports of through the fall. But if there are threats on our Capitol or members of Congress, then we should be aware of those issues as as they come up too. But right now, I mean, you can hardly get around the Capitol. I do feel safe at the Capitol. That day, obviously, on January 6th was abhorrent. It was a day of violence where 5 people died. And the only thing standing between us and the violent rioters and the insurrectionists were the Capitol Hill police. And so we all need to make sure that we are safe when we go to work. But right now, I don't think that when you look around at the Capitol and the fencing that we have for miles and miles and the troops, it looks like more of a green zone, right, of a war-torn country. And it's just something I've never thought I'd ever see in my lifetime. And there's no effort to show the free country that we are. I mean, that is reflected in our Capitol.
The House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, has said that she's going to set up a 9/11-style commission into what happened on January 6th. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I mean, the thing that we have to be cognizant of is that, when we look at how this may or may not be done, when these kinds of commissions have been done in the past, we want to make sure there isn't any open-ended entitlements coming out of it, or that we shred any of our Bill of Rights, like the Fourth Amendment after the 9/11 Commission. I think that's really important. I do want to get to the bottom of what happened, but we just had an impeachment where no witnesses were called, in an impeachment that was unconstitutional. But when we look at what happened, it would be great to get to the bottom of it, to understand how it happened and what measures were taken to secure the Capitol, what was requested or what was done and not done, so that in the event that this happens in the future, we don't have a repeat of it. I think one of the reasons, obviously this was such a violent day for everybody, but we witnessed it across the country. We've never seen anything like it. We want to make sure that we never see anything like it again that occurs. But it's not just January 6th we should be talking about. There's been violence across the country for the last year. And I've been talking about this since the events. I was a very strong voice after January 6th on the Republican side of the aisle. But we've got to take responsibility for ourselves. And we've had rhetoric on both sides of the aisle. I've been threatened to be shot by Republicans now and Democrats, right? We're seeing this rhetoric ratchet up. It's not getting better right now. And we need to really look at ourselves and say, what are we going to do about this in the future? We've got to have some common ground. That can exist, and we can find a way to acknowledge the problem that we have in this country with the divisiveness, maybe take a break from social media from time to time and sort of cool our heels a little bit. But what's happening right now is wrong, and it's very concerning for me as a mom. I'm a single mom of 2 kids that I'm raising, and this is not the country that I was raised in, that we were raised in. And this is not the future, this divided future that I want for my children. And I'm going to be a strong voice calling it out on both sides of the aisle.
Of course, the Senate did vote that the trial was constitutional. Some Republicans sided with Democrats on that, and it went forward, and President Trump was ultimately acquitted because they didn't get the 67 votes to convict. But the minority leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, as you watched, I'm sure, said that the president was practically and morally responsible for inciting what happened. Do you agree with him on that?
I do believe that rhetoric can lead to violence. And I look at what happened to me in the days and weeks leading up to January 6th, that I had folks that were threatening to shoot me on social media. And this isn't okay. We do have a responsibility, I believe, a moral responsibility to ensure that that doesn't happen again, that we don't instigate any kind of an attack. But one of the things that I think is missing in this conversation is that they didn't get 2/3 of it. I do believe impeachment was unconstitutional. I've spoken about it previously because in the House, when they filed articles of impeachment, there was literally 1 hour of debate on the floor with Democrats and 1 hour of debate allotted for Republicans. There was no investigation open. There were no committee hearings. There were no witnesses called, nothing in judiciary or even a special committee before the articles of impeachment were passed out of the House and sent to the Senate. If you can take away due process for the President of the United States, you can take away due process for any American. The one thing I do want to add is that if prosecutors believe the President incited the attack, then they can bring charges in criminal court. And anyone that was acted in a violent manner at the riots at the Capitol Dome should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And that's the same for anybody in any city across the country who's tried to bring harm to people or their property.
Late Tuesday afternoon, former President Trump put out a statement very critical of the top Republican in the Senate, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, calling him a dour, sullen, an unsmiling political hack. Writing, McConnell will never do what the former president says must be done to secure a fair and just electoral system in the future. And looking ahead, the former president wrote, where necessary and appropriate, he will back primary rivals who espouse making America great again and the policy of America first. Now, in a new Quinnipiac poll this week, 3/4 of Republicans in the survey say they want Trump to have a prominent role in the party's future. What does Congresswoman Mace think of that?
Well, when you look at the policies of his administration over the last 4 years, whether that is fewer taxes, we had lower taxes, and I know that in my district, when we had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act come through, wages went up. When you allow the market to thrive, supply and demand can dictate wages. You don't need the government dictating a $15 minimum wage. When a good market, a good economy the wages will be that, and even better than that. We saw under his administration Operation Warp Speed, where we had vaccinations approved rather than in 10 years, in 10 months. And now we are seeing the benefit of that as we roll out the different vaccinations. Of course, we would all like it to be much faster than it is right now, but we wouldn't be where we are today had we not had these gains. In my own district, we are against offshore drilling off South Carolina's coast, for example, and President Trump signed a moratorium, a 10-year ban on drilling off our coast. And so we had tremendous success under his administration, and those policies showed we had the lowest unemployment rate for everybody in this country. We had great gains economically, and those are the things that we should be championing in our future, because we're seeing, now that we've lost the House, we've lost the Senate, we lost the White House, we're going to be seeing policies that come through that will not be bipartisan, that will be driven by the leftist agenda, and they will be detrimental to our economy. So the things that he achieved under his presidency, under his administration, those are the things that we should be working toward and trying to do better.
There is still this move toward a $1.9 trillion Corona financial aid package. I know the House keeps working on it. The Senate will have its version as well. Mm-hmm. What are you, I know you're sort of on the outside looking in as Republicans because Democrats are putting this together. What are you hoping happens?
I was hoping, previous to our committee hearings in the House last week, and I sit on 3 committees now, I was hoping all the talk of unity was going to be true, that we could work together. But come to find out last week, not a single, in the committees I was on, not a single Republican amendment was passed through. That was the directive, my understanding, that we wouldn't be able to pass any amendments to the budget reconciliation process. Well, that's not working together. Having a one-way street is not unity. I haven't lost hope. I am hopeful. I've received some pledges from some of my colleagues across the aisle to work with me on certain issues that I'm passionate about. And I'm going to hold them to that. We cannot sit here and talk about unity and then have a one-way conversation where we don't have a meeting of the minds and don't have Republicans and Democrats working together. That's not how unity works. And so I'm going to be hopeful for the spring, but time will tell whether or not we can actually pull this off.
There is money that could be allocated for schools. Mm-hmm. Where do you think we should be on? I know some school systems are hybrid, some are full-time, others are still shut down. What are you trying to get? What do you think should happen as we get into the spring?
Well, on that note, Congress has appropriated $68 billion to expedite the reopening of schools, but only $4 billion of that has been spent. We've got the CDC, we've got Dr. Fauci, we've got the science telling us when precautions are in place at school, it is a very safe and healthy learning environment for our children because they're 6 feet apart, they're washing their hands, they're wearing their masks. And so what we have in this country, this policy where we're not following the science, has been very detrimental to moms in the workplace who can't go to work because they're at home with their children, and children who are suffering. Mental health is up 31%. ER visits and mental health with high school students right now. We have children who are failing. We have children not showing up for virtual school. We have kids who can't get lunches, that are going to be malnourished. We have kids who don't have access to the internet. This is enormously detrimental, and it shouldn't be teachers' unions because it's teachers' unions that are driving the debate and driving the decisions of the Biden administration. It should be parents who are making the decisions for their kids, whether or not they want to be at home 100% of the time, or whether or not they want to be in a hybrid situation, or whether or not they believe their kids should be in school 5 days a week. I have a district in my congressional district where the rate of incidence of students with COVID-19, and these are kids going to school 5 days a week, is 0.5%. And so it's very safe for them. And we're doing a huge disservice by not listening to parents and the students that have enormous needs right now.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
This is Jason Chaffetz with your Fox News commentary coming up.
Yet another round of ice and snow is on the march across the U.S., but it would be hard-pressed to match the size and scope of the last one, which dumped more than a foot of snow on parts of the Midwest, spawned a deadly tornado in North Carolina, and brought icy conditions to parts of the South that rarely have to deal with it. A storm system now blamed for more than a dozen deaths in several states, as Arctic temperatures also descended from Canada all the way to Mexico.
It's just critically important for the power to be restored as quickly as possible.
Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner especially concerned about seniors as millions of Texans wait for power to be restored after a combination of frozen equipment and surging demand prompting rolling outages. The senior vice president of CenterPoint Energy, Kenneth Coleman, pledging to restore power as quickly as possible, but on Tuesday afternoon only able to offer a trade-off.
We still have to have the same amount of power outages, but we're trying to trade off those who've been out for the extended period of time and replace them with customers who haven't been out.
Temperatures aren't expected to get above freezing in Texas until Friday. And even if people have somewhere else to go, it's too icy in some areas to risk getting there.
We're seeing hundreds of roadways that are really not safe to travel. Statewide, they're telling people stay home.
Jeff Manasso is the Midwest correspondent for Fox News Radio.
Down in Houston, 1.3 million people without power. Statewide, about 4 million. And we've heard from emergency officials down in Houston saying, don't heat your house with grills. Don't heat your house with anything gas related or your generators. Keep them away from your home. They've done almost 100 calls, the fire department, in and around Houston over carbon monoxide related poisoning. And that was after 2 deaths. A woman and her daughter tried to stay warm in their car. They started the vehicle. The garage door was shut. And so they lost their lives. And so, but people are panicking. And I think that one of the things about the Northeast and the Northwest and the Midwest is we're all generally winter weather hardy. We know how to deal with this. We've been there, done that, and we have the infrastructure. But down in Texas, the Deep South, when there's this much snow, when there's this much ice, and there's these freezing temperatures, they don't have the resources. And you add to that the fact that the power grid has failed. And that's causing some huge problems.
So what are the local officials in Texas telling people they should do to try to cope with it? Because obviously when you don't have power and temperatures are dropping into the single digits, your options get to be few and far between in terms of bundling up enough to not get injured, especially if you're elderly.
Yeah, I mean, what they're doing now is they're telling people to get to warming centers. And the sad part about that is that at least down in Houston, they're already maxed out. They're over capacity on those, so they're telling people contact your neighbors, particularly elderly people, your family members, your friends. Can they take on more people in their homes that do have power? Get somewhere warm, but by all means, do not stay in your house if your house is freezing. I've got friends in Dallas and family in Austin, and they're telling me that their toilet bowls are now iced up. It's that cold inside their homes. So it's to the point where it's a little dangerous, or it's a lot dangerous. And so while resources are stretched thin, do what you have to do to get somewhere warm.
And it's not as if some of these places have never had snow or ice before. It happens, occasionally, but I guess it's just not frequent enough to lead to any sort of, annual budgets or annual preparation for those things like other parts of the country that get snow regularly would do. But there could be, as we always hear with climate change, more frequent extreme weather in general. So are officials in states like Texas and other parts of the South starting to think about preparing for these things to happen more often?
Well,
or is it too soon? They're just trying to get through this one right now.
I mean, look, I think it's all of the above. We know Texas Governor Greg Abbott's calling for an investigation into the folks who run the power grid there. So that's through the legislature. Perhaps they will come up with an idea or a plan, because we have seen more of these more frequent cycles of colder weather in the southern states. So, maybe, but to put it in perspective, if you look at the city of Detroit, which got about a foot of snow overnight, still digging out, transportation and nightmares happening there, Chicago and other places. But the city of Detroit has about 2,000 miles of just city blocks, city streets within the city limits that they're plowing out right now, and they expect to get that done within about 24 hours, if all goes right. They've got the infrastructure, they've got the salt, they've got the plows, they've got the extra plows that go on the garbage trucks and things like that. And so that's the infrastructure that some of these southern cities and states would need to be able to accomplish goals like that. And it's so expensive to pull off. And I just don't know that they've got the resources for that.
One other thing, because I've heard reports of windmills freezing over, natural gas pipelines frozen in Texas. Did those things actually happen?
Yeah, we're seeing wind turbines. If you go into some parts of Texas, all you see is wind turbines. They're everywhere. And a lot of them got gunked up with snow and ice, and so they're frozen solid. And so what do? I'm sure there's going to be an argument about renewables and contingency plans, but the reality is that system failed in the state of Texas. So I'm sure there will be discussions in the future about that.
In addition to the Texas governor's call for possible reform of the power grid operator, federal regulators say they will review outages in both Texas and the Midwest to identify and address problems in the bulk power system from the extreme cold weather.
I think it is a reminder to people how essential it is that power be reliable.
James Freeman is assistant editor for the Wall Street Journal editorial page and a Fox News contributor.
And there has been such a focus in recent years on trying to move electricity systems to renewable sources like wind and solar, I think with an environmental mission, but perhaps regulators often forgetting how important reliability is. And you see the images of wind turbines frozen amid these temperatures. Obviously, the low temperatures are challenging all kinds of electricity systems, all kinds of power production. But the fact is that we've seen it over and over again. It's in Texas, and we frequently see it in California when there is a push to move to renewables instead of the more reliable sources such as coal. You do, unfortunately, have to sacrifice some level of reliability.
And is it a combination of, supply versus demand, of course, because when the weather gets cold or in the summertime when it gets too hot, if you have a, big jump in demand, you have to be able to meet that with the supply. But also, we hear about outdated infrastructure, or in this case, maybe just infrastructure that isn't ready to make the transition that some advocates are wanting to make to this, renewable energy. There's one Rice University professor who basically blamed an outdated power grid in a tweet. But is this entire issue then a setback for the green energy movement?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that if there is a problem of lack of investment or misdirected investment, the fault has to be put on regulators. These are highly regulated industries, obviously more so in California than in Texas, but utilities everywhere are highly regulated. That includes their investments. I think what we are seeing is you've also had big investment by federal taxpayers, huge incentives to build wind assets, to build solar, and we see they are simply not as reliable as other forms of energy, even if the heavy subsidies have now made it appear that they're often cost competitive with more traditional sources of energy. So I would hope one thing that would come out of this is an understanding that that the power needs to be reliable most of all.
And with the California wildfires and the rolling blackouts that have become basically a new kind of normal there, some of that is aimed at trying to prevent sparking fires because of aging equipment. But in the case of Texas and the extreme cold, these outages are blamed on a combination of equipment freezing, but also some intentional, controlled outages to help manage supply. Does it seem like this has caught not only customers, but also the officials involved off guard?
Yeah, certainly there's been a massive surge in demand. And so in order to save their systems, there have been controlled blackouts. And granted, this is not normal to have sub-freezing temperatures everywhere in the state of Texas. But I think reasonable people have warned that these events can and do happen, albeit rarely, and that you want most of all to have a system that's there when it's most needed. But I think it should be a wake-up call for politicians, for regulators, for voters to say what is our priority. And obviously in Washington there's a lot of talk about the Biden plan and discussion about how quickly he intends to move America toward a net zero emission energy system. I think this is a moment to say, what are the costs of that kind of transition? Obviously, they are large financially, but they also can have a huge cost in terms of people being able to get power when they need it.
What do you think will be the immediate effect of this? Is it going to tap the brakes, so to speak, on some of these plans, or are we heading for congressional hearings on these issues, perhaps? Or what do you think could be, the most immediate result?
I think the main result is that it now changes the debate in Washington, which is, for good reason, is largely about costs. And this was an issue on the campaign, sort of how far toward that Green New Deal is our president going to go? Is it going to be a $2 trillion commitment? Is it going to be more than that? But I think what this issue does is it reminds people that there are issues beyond money here. And I think there will probably be new pressure on Team Biden as it rolls out its climate agenda to make the case that the sacrifices asked of people are justified by the science.
James Freeman, assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal editorial page and a Fox News contributor. Thank you so much for your time.
You too. Thanks, Lisa.
Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand, from Fox News and Amazon Alexa. Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Jason Chaffetz.
What's on your mind?
Livid about what she called the failure at the top. In the wake of the January 6th breach of the United States Capitol, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi insisted that the Sergeant-at-Arms for the House of Representatives be fired. He subsequently resigned, and Pelosi appointed an interim Sergeant-at-Arms. The Senate made a similar move. Pelosi also moved to fire the chief of the Capitol Police. At a press conference on January 7th, Pelosi said, "There was a failure at the top of the Capitol Police, and I think Mr. Stevens' son, he hasn't even called us." Who is ultimately at the top of the Capitol Police? Pelosi knows she is. She and the Senate leader, though they don't manage day-to-day operations, have ultimate authority over Capitol security. They failed. She quickly vowed to fire the Sergeant-at-Arms and the chief of Capitol Police. But what about her own responsibilities and culpability in what all agree was an inadequate response, intelligence failure, and shameful preparation for such an event? Pelosi's long-term approach to security has apparently failed to protect herself, the United States Capitol, members of Congress, and the public. If we're serious about holding the people at the top accountable, Pelosi should also have to answer questions about her own leadership. Here are some questions Pelosi should answer. What was your role in authorizing or denying National Guard support before and after January 6th? After the 2011 shooting of now former Representative Gabby Giffords, what changed with regard to security? After the shooting of Republican House Whip Steve Scalise, were any changes made to security? What happens when a member of Congress's life is threatened? How are they expected to protect themselves? In 2018, $25,000 was allocated to each member's reimbursement allowance, MRA, for security. Did that work? Do you have enough cameras in the public spaces inside and outside the Capitol? Why can't law enforcement secure doors in the Capitol, and why isn't there bulletproof glass? Why were known COVID-infected members allowed on the grounds of the Capitol? You insisted members should be fined $5,000 if they failed to pass through metal detectors. Should you be fined for not passing through the metal detector? You said the enemy is within. What did you mean, and who specifically are you afraid of in Congress? How do you respond to the February 1st letter from former Capitol Police Chief's son? Your own home was vandalized this year on January 1st, yet nobody was arrested. The San Francisco Police Department was quoted saying, unidentified suspects had painted graffiti on the garage door and left a pig's head on the sidewalk. How does this happen to the Speaker of the House? Speaker Pelosi, you need to answer these questions. I'm Jason Chaffetz, a Fox News contributor and former chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Stay on top of the latest news and information from Fox News. Listen and download the Fox News Hourly Update on your time. The trending stories you need anytime you want it. Listen and download now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.